listening to the Zetitic Newscast on the Zetitic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today, that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us. But the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
This is Dave, and Xavier Diamant with the Zetitic Newscast, and I think we can safely stop it right there.
Yeah.
And we wanted to start with Greta Thunberg in the United Nations because, man, between the last episode and this episode, so much dramatic news has come out, and it just seems like, I mean, I think we were both on the same page that this is going to have to be the topic du jour for episode 2, because it was such a huge distraction from so many more important developments. But the United Nations got together, they farted, and this this individual in her little speech that you heard was like all that anybody was talking about, and I think that maybe inspired you to start working on this next article, which has yet to be published. It's maybe a work in progress, but I thought it was a very apropos title for this episode. You always have a way with the headlines and the words. Climate catastrophizing, elite misanthropy, scarcity, psychosis, and adolescent authoritarianism. It really hits on all the major notes, I think, of what's going on here. So I've got a lot of content. You've got a lot written here that we can talk about. Xavier, where do you want to start with this story and the media circus around it?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that usually when there's a media bombardment and kind of a massive echo chamber effect that's created, a media storm, it's there to pretty much cover for something else. And I think it's interesting to note that we went from talking about Epstein and the massive implications that has for the entire geopolitical matrix, and all of a sudden it's like, oh well, here's this child that we can all sort of voyeuristically perceive, giving us all this scripted advice from this big money effort to more or less convince people that they're parasites and there just needs to be less of us and we need to go with less. And
in her speech, she keeps referring to you.
Oh, sure.
Who is she talking to? Who is she talking about as far as you is concerned? And she's citing all these statistics. Is she talking to the United Nations ambassadors? Is she talking to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? Who is she talking? What is she referring to?
I mean, from just the thrust of what she's presenting, it seems to be directed at your kind of average middle class, quote unquote, first worlder. And it's
is that because they're the ones responsible for all
of the horrible stuff,
the consumption that is driving the emittance of CO2? Is that?
Yeah, and the notice that she said the politics and the solutions are nowhere in sight. So this is very much a politicized arena of discussion, and like we already have enough sort of browbeating within the whole conversation of climate change.
How dare you?
Well, right. It's like, how dare you stop with just browbeating? Like, we need serious totalitarian boots on the ground and penalties being exacted against everyone. I mean, that seems to be the kind of thing. Like, you're not, and there's this like quasi oracle vibe that they're trying to manufacture around her, where she gets to talk about huge years in the future and like multiple generations going forward
with complete certainty and confidence that this is what is going to happen. I don't know.
You are not yet mature enough.
I don't know if 50% is okay. It's
right.
It's okay with you, but it's not okay with me.
And everyone who may be born in the future who will feel exactly the same as I do. I mean, it's like the new Oracle of Delphi, but it's in this materialistic pseudoscientific garb.